All right, hello everyone, and welcome back to our trawl through Dr. Dave Regis's ebook, Chess Tactics and Combinations, 10 Steps to Learn Them. And I believe you can actually find the transcript for this from the website of the Exeter Chess Club, EXETER, if you ever wanted to follow the PDF. But where have we got to? Right, we were looking at checkmating the uncastled king. And so today we've got several more examples of that from mostly from beginner games, I think, or more intermediate games, but every now and again we stumble upon some famous grandmasters as we go through the book. And if you're wondering why it sounds like I don't know what's coming, well, I kind of don't. I'm doing this live, so to speak, or as live. And really all I'm doing is marking up how many games we're going to look at in the video to keep the length manageable, and then sort of doing the analysis live. So I make the occasional mistake as well, of course. Only human. Right, our first one today is Shaktler against Grabowski from Baden-Weiler in 1985. So let's see how this one goes. E4 and E5. Knight F3, Knight C6, D4, E takes D4, Bishop C4. So we've got the Scotch Gambit, and the whole idea, I say, of the Scotch Gambit is to not bother wasting time recapturing this pawn because it's not going anywhere. You'll be able to do that in a minute, and to start lining your forces up against F7, get castle, get developed, and so on. Let's see how that works in this game. Bishop to B4 from black, which is check. Not the best move actually, because white can gain time against the bishop. I say that it's an okay move. Yeah, it's not fair to say it's not the best move. It's all right. It's all right. But white can gain time against the bishop by blocking the check with the pawn. It's not like that's winning or anything. It's just, yeah, okay, it's doable. Takes. So now you see the pawn's attacking the bishop again. The pawn's defended, so the bishop's now got to waste time moving, and goes to E7. So currently the position is actually level. I made it sound like black was in trouble there. I did a bit of a misspeak, but bishop E7 is played, and that is a mistake. That's simply not the right place to put the bishop, and you can see that from what's happened to the bar. It's now +3, and Queen D5 is the very unpleasant move that punishes it, lining up the battery of queen and bishop against F7. What on earth is black supposed to do? Well, actually resign probably isn't the worst idea. You can't really play knight F6 because although that looks like it defends, well, I say that, you might have to play knight F6. It was the move that sprang to mind. But after bishop takes, you've still got the same threat, but at least now you can castle. So maybe that's the only move. We'll have a look. Let's just see if the computer says, is knight F6 actually the only move? Yeah, so knight H6 is the only move. Yeah, I was right. Yeah, okay. So that actually is the only move. But in the game, black played D6, hoping to create an escape square for the king, but that's actually checkmate in 2. I'm not even going to ask you to find it because it's pretty straightforward. The bishop supports the queen. The king only has one legal square, and now bishop here is mate, because there's nowhere for the king to go, and the bishop's defended by the queen, and the queen guards there. So very, very nice. Yeah, bit of a mess there for black. Okay, let's see our second game. And if that one was a bit of a mess for black, this one is a bit of a mess for white. We have 1993 Reuter against Schlinker. No place name for this one, but let's see how the game goes. So E4. Knight C6, the Nimzovich defense, but I think it's just going to transpose into a Scotch game anyway. Let's have a look. Yeah, sure enough, it's going to transpose. So transposition is when you start with one opening and then have a really weird move order and end up with another opening. And that's what's happened here, because after pawn takes and bishop to C4, we're back into the Scotch Gambit that we just saw. It's just that this time white is going to be the one coming off on the losing end. So both of the enemy bishops are pointing towards the soft F2 and F7 squares. Usually suggests carnage is coming. C3 from white, D3 from black. So instead of capturing, just moving forward and aiming at this square. Knight to G5 from white. So now the knight is pointing here and the bishop's pointing here. And remember, the queen can't take because the knight is defended. Knight E5 from black, defending backwards. But white's not too bothered. White goes for knight takes f7 anyway, which, you know, computers saying is a slight advantage to black. So you can't really play that. It's not the best move, but white tries it. Queen to f6 from black. Now let's see what the computer makes of that. Advantage to black still, says the computer, and the threat here is queen takes, because the bishop is also guarding, so black is threatening checkmate. White plays queen to h5, so lining the queen up to the black king, but as you can see from the bar, it's actually a disastrous blunder, and it's checkmate in 5. And in fact, Dr. Dave in the book writes, white has some threats, but it's black's turn next. So if you want to press pause here and see if you can work out what on earth is the checkmate in 5 black moves, absolutely forced, there's nothing white can do about it, then feel free to press pause and have a go at finding it. Otherwise, I'll show you the sequence in 3, 2, and 1. Okay, the first thing is to notice this weak f2 square. And so queen takes pawn is check, and the king must go to d1. There's no other legal move. The second move is queen to c2 check, which is supported by the pawn and forces the king back to here. With the king no longer on that square, this bishop becomes undefended. So queen to c1 check. The king now has no legal moves itself. The bishop guards this square, the pawn guards this one, and the queen both of these two. So the only move to continue the game is queen to d1. And now queen to e3 is check. There's only 2 ways to get out of this. You can either block, in which case that's checkmate, or you can move the king to f1, in which case that is checkmate. And in both of cases of those checkmates, there was a piece defending the queen, which is why the king couldn't capture. So, ouch, yeah, that's pretty brutal. All right, let's get another board. And we have Clarice against Van Dijk, a tournament in Vlissingen in the Netherlands, 1996. Dr. Davis called this one Queens and Bishops. And I'm just looking at the diagram in the transcript, and I think that we could have a little look at this as a possible puzzle. So we'll do that in a sec. Here we go. E4, E5, knight F3, knight C6, bishop C4, knight F6, knight G5, and D5. So this is the best way if you're going to play this, this version of the 3 knights, the Italian game. You block the bishop attacking this square with d5, and white will play e takes d5, and black really shouldn't play knight takes pawn here because it can lead to the fried liver attack, but black goes for it, and white doesn't play knight takes f7, which is a shame, but instead does d4, which is still okay, but knight takes f7 is a bit brutal. E4 is played by black. And now white plays knight takes f7. Okay, so just a move later. So it's attacking the queen and the rook. So there's really not a lot black can do, one would imagine, apart from take. Now queen to h5 check, but also this attacks the knight, so it's a fork, and the bishop attacks the knight too, of course. So there's 2 pieces attacking there. G6. And now bishop takes d5 check, so you can ignore the attack on the queen because it's check. King to g7, and now it is checkmate in 2. So if you want to hit pause and try to work out how on earth it's checkmate in 2 moves for white, well, press pause now, otherwise I carry on in 3, 2, and 1. And once again, I guess the main point here is this sort of deadly diagonal, as Dr. Dave likes to call it, pointing towards the enemy king, and it's no surprise that it overlaps the f7 square. That bishop is crucial. But it's this bishop that plays the first move. So bishop check. The king cannot go here or here, and it can't take the bishop because of the queen. So there's only one legal move, which is king to f6. And now queen to g5 is mate. The bishop protects the queen. The other bishop guards these 2 squares. The queen guards these 3 squares, and the bishop on h6 guards this square here. No escape. Ouch. That was pretty nasty. All right, the next 5 games that will take us to the end of this particular video are all checkmates with a knight. So let's see how some of these work. So the next game is Wall against Vargas, San Antonio 1979. And I wonder if this is the same player, Mr. Wall, who we've seen so many times through this book. But let's see how he gets on. So e4, e5, knight to f3, knight to c6. Bishop to c4, knight to f6, d4, e takes d4, and castle. So white is inviting black to play knight takes e4, but it's just too risky. You can't go pawn grabbing when your king's stuck in the middle of the board on an open file where there can be an enemy rook. And black doesn't go for that, quite rightly, although I don't know if h6 is the greatest move in the world. It kind of feels like a bit of a waste of time. Yeah, computer didn't like it much. But even it's not awful. Knight to h4 from white. I don't really get what the point of that is, but in fact, the computer says it's given an advantage to black. I don't really understand what it's doing on h4, but I mean, okay. Black now goes in for knight takes e4. Now, surely this is just too, again, like I said a minute ago, too risky. There's just an open file leading to the king and the possibility of the rook getting on it. Yeah, so, you know, computer says the position's level, but I'm not convinced about that one. So queen to h5 is played, and we've got the queen threatening here with the support of the bishop. And what on earth is black going to do about that? Well, black, again, it's the tiniest of advantages to black. So there's clearly a way out of it. But black plays g6. And that is a total disaster of a move. Now, it's not quite actually checkmate. It's not a forced checkmate. Dr. Dave puts in the book, the main line is mate in 3. It's not forced mate in 3, but there is an outstanding move here for white based on the themes that we've been looking at, the weak f2 and f7 squares. So if you want to press pause and try to work out what white should play here, then absolutely feel free. Otherwise, I will carry on in 3, 2, and 1. And the correct move is the fantastic bishop takes f7. And what's so clever about that? Well, if king takes, queen here check, supported by the knight, king has to go to e7, and that's checkmate. The knight does the checking, and the queen guards the escape squares. So that's pretty nasty. In fact, the only move that black can play to prolong the game in this position is to not take the bishop. You'd have to play king e7. And now I'm just going to let the computer tell us the right next move. Possibly queen to d5 is my guess, because then you're really threatening knight here, mate. So let's see, how's my guess? Yeah, fantastic. Okay, yeah, so queen to d5 is the move, because if black does something silly, just say they play a5, I would think knight takes here is just really horrid. Oh, the king can sort of sneak out towards f6. Okay, fine. What's the best move for black in this position? It says nothing. Well, actually nothing. I mean, if everything is +8 near enough, then I'm not even, it's not even worth thinking about. So definitely very, very nice for white. Okay, let's go to our next game. All right, the next game is another smothered mate, and we are Hoffman against Hellman from Berlin. Get this, 1904. So we're going back in a time machine here. It's 117 years ago as I record this. Let's see how the game went. Oh, e4, e5, we'll turn the lines off. Knight to f3 and knight to c6. Bishop to c4 and knight to f6. And d4. Played. Pawn takes d4. So we're back in the Scotch gambit again. Castles from white and bishop e7 from black. This all looks perfectly reasonable so far. Knight takes d4 from white. Knight takes e4 from black. Okay, that's not so good. Instinctively, I just don't like the fact that there's now no pawns on the line with the black king. But the computer says it's only the tiniest of advantages to white, so I guess it's okay. White plays knight to f5. So that's looking at this pawn that's unprotected and this one that's only protected by the king. What happens here? I mean, computer says slight advantage to white, but it's a plus 0.7, it's plus 0.6, it's not the end of the game. And yet after this move, I think it probably is about to be, yeah, suddenly the bar has leapt, absolutely leapt up. So how did the game continue? Well, queen to d5 was played, and that looks pretty nasty because it's forking the checkmate and the knight. And black played the rather awful move, rook to f8. And it's an awful move because it's mate in one. The king is now completely surrounded by his own army, and therefore knight to g7 is simply a smothered checkmate because there's no escape possible. I wonder if there's something better black could have done here. What could black do here? Not a lot by the look of it. d6 isn't going to work because queen takes king there, bishop e6. Knight g5 is not going to work really to protect that square. Maybe knight d6 doesn't work, and yet the computer says it's only +3. I'm just curious now. I must be missing something silly. What's the saving move here? What's the best move? Just a castle. Oh, okay, fair enough. Fair enough. Okay, so just a castle. I was just assuming these dark squares and this bishop might come diving in, or maybe the knight land on that square. In fact, yeah, knight h6. Okay, so it's a big advantage to white in this position. King h8, but queen 8. Yeah, okay, fair enough. Yeah, fair enough. Massive advantage to white, really. Yeah. Ouch. Very unpleasant stuff. All right, let's get our next board and go to our next game. And we have Chancellor against no name. We don't have the name of the player with the black pieces here, but it's Mannheim, 1939. So e4 and e5. Let's just turn that off unless we need it. Knight f3 and f5. Okay, the Latvian gambit. d3 is a very defensive way of playing against the Latvian. It's not bad, but it's not the most exciting. Knight c6, knight c3, knight to f6, bishop to g5, h6 from black. Now, this won't be a blunder, I don't think, particularly, but I don't like it because look at this. It's completely, I can't use a mouse apparently, it's completely open, this diagonal of death towards the black king. And it's not going to take too much for white to get a queen on that diagonal. So let's see how the game progressed, because I bet that turns out to be important. Bishop takes knight, yes, and now the knight isn't defending this square anymore where the queen could come to. I bet this turns out to be important. Queen takes f6, knight to d5. Now that attacks the queen and this pawn, and if knight takes pawn, then it's check and wins the rook. So that forces black's next move, I think, queen to d8. And now white plays knight to d4. Yeah, okay, here we go. I thought this might happen. If pawn takes knight, then queen to h5 is actually mate because the knight guards this square and the queen is on this diagonal. I mean, black can play here, but okay, there's your checkmate. No way out of it. So I thought that might be coming. So instead, of course, black doesn't play pawn takes knight. Just looking at the position. Knight to e7 is played. Okay, and then knight takes f5. And so we've got a position here that's +2. So very, very nice for white indeed, with this possibility on the white squares. But in the game, black makes a bit of a blunder. And I say a bit of a blunder, I mean a catastrophic, hideous disaster with c6, which walks into checkmate in one, another smothered mate. Knight attacks the king, also guards the only escape square, and black's own forces smother the king's potential escape. Wow, that's what a nasty win that is. Okay, let's get the next board for the next game. All right, our next game is no name playing white against Elbrond Pedersen, 1990. So let's switch this one round because black wins this one. And we have e4 and e5. And we have knight f3 and knight c6. And we have bishop to c4 and knight f6. So an invitation to the fried liver. Okay, knight to g5 and d5. Okay, pawn takes d5. And black doesn't go for knight takes d5, doesn't go for the fried liver, unfortunately, because that would have been quite exciting. Instead, knight to d4. I think it's more normal to play the knight to a5 there, I think. But as I'm not an e4 player, really, I could be wrong about that. But anyway, knight to d4 is played. And d6 from white, so opening up the bishop onto this square, which the knight already attacks. So perfectly logical, understandable move. Black's not scared in this game. Queen takes d6. And that creates some sort of escape square for the king, I guess. What's played? Knight takes f7. So the bishop defends. There it is, that weak square again. Knight attacks the rook and the queen. There's just one problem. Although this looks lovely, in fact, in this particular game, it is now advantage to black. So let's see why. What gets played next? I've lost my place. Sorry. Ping. Queen to c6 is played. So having an eyeball on this square and against the unprotected bishop. White goes straight for the free material, goes straight for the rook. That looks terribly risky with the king. Yeah, look at the bar here, -6, with the king stuck in the middle of the board. That looked horribly risky. Queen takes g2 is played, threatening the rook, and rook to f1 is played. Queen to e4 check. Oh, I can see what's coming here, because there's no way for the king to escape. The only thing that can happen is for white to put something in the way. Now, of course, if they put the queen in the way, just knight takes queen, and black's winning in the game. Bishop to e2 is played, but now knight here is checkmate. It's a smothered mate of a sort, because the 5 white pieces block the king, and you can't play bishop takes. Look, it's not going to let me, because the bishop is pinned. Oh, ouch. What a horrible, horrible final position for white that is. Okay. Right, we have one more game to go. And we have Holloway against Senf, Germany 2005. Very similar to the previous game by the looks of it, this one. So e4, e5, just rattle through the moves. Bishop c4, knight f6. Knight f3, knight c6, knight to g5 and d5, e takes d5 and knight to d4. So I think so far it's actually the same, completely the same as the last game. d6 from white, queen takes d6. When's this going to vary from the last game? Surely it's exactly the same so far. Knight takes f7, queen to c6. Here's the difference. Now, in this game, the 8th move, white doesn't go for the rook, which is what happened in the last game, but instead plays knight takes e5. So now we're attacking the, not there, we're attacking the queen, but it's still massive advantage to black. So let's see how this happens. I haven't turned the board the wrong way around this time, or from the black point of view, but it doesn't matter. Queen takes g2, so threatening the rook. Rook to f1 played, so that the king is defending the rook, and queen to e4 check. Now this time there's a difference, because the f3 square that was so deadly in the previous game is covered by the knight. So when bishop e2 is played, knight f3 is actually a mistake, because knight takes knight, it doesn't win. But in this instance, black has a different threat and simply changes target. So now knight takes pawn. Once again, it's a smothering of the king. The king is surrounded by his own forces, and the only thing white can do to get out of this is queen takes knight, queen takes queen, and now, of course, black's just a queen up and winning comfortably. Okay, that will do for that episode. We've still got, what, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 more attacks against the uncastled king to come, but I'll do that in the next recording. Hope that was interesting. Thank you very much, and I'll see you next time for some more chess. Cheers.